Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. I have started a discussion on what is Sunnah. I mentioned in my previous presentation that unlike in the case of the Quran, Sunnah doesn't enjoy a definition amongst Muslims which is shared by all. When that's the case, then we've got no other choice but to consider with an open mind, as best as we can, the different important options, alternatives. I've already discussed the first and the most popular understanding about what Sunnah is. That is, many people amongst Muslims believe that whatever the Prophet, may God's mercy be on him, said, did, or silently approved, all of it constitutes Sunnah, which is valid and important for religious purposes for all Muslims. I mentioned that there is another point of view which is, one might call, the very opposite of the first point of view, which says that there is nothing called Sunnah. There's only the Quran which the Muslims are expected to understand and follow for them to be able to do well in religion. The people who have this understanding are commonly called Quranists. Quranists. These people are not very large in number, but they do have a reasonable following amongst many parts of the Muslim world. And therefore it's important that their arguments are properly understood, and if there is a response to those arguments, that response should also be properly appreciated. And obviously, as I said, it's so very important that when we are talking about religion, we must try as much as we can to stay away from the influences of emotional attachments and biases, and find out what the truth is. So let me now tell you what exactly are the arguments. I don't claim that I'm going to mention all the arguments that are presented by the Quranists, but I'll mention some of the more important arguments that they put across to plead their case that there is nothing called Sunnah. It's only the Quran which Muslims are expected by the Almighty to understand and follow. One of the arguments that they present from the Quran is from Surah Al-Kahf, Surah number 18, verse 110. It's the very last verse of Surah Al-Kahf, which says, "Qul, O Prophet, tell them, Innama ana basharum mithlukum. I'm simply a human like you. Yuha ilayya, except that wahi, divine revelation, has been revealed upon me." So what they say is that the Quran itself has required the Prophet to declare before humankind that he is making no claims except for the fact that he has received divine revelation, which is the Quran, and otherwise he is the same category as all other humans. And therefore, when he has delivered the Quran to the mankind, he has done his job which the Almighty wanted him to discharge. And therefore, Muslims should now focus their attention on understanding this divine revelation and following it. The other argument that we find they quite often present is the 67th verse of Surah Al-Maidah. Surah Al-Maidah is the fifth surah of the Quran. In this verse, the Almighty is asking the Prophet again, Ya ayyuhar Rasul, O Messenger, balligh ma unzila ilayk. You convey to them whatever has been revealed to you. you let them know, deliver to them whatever has been revealed to you. وَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلْ, and if you will not do it, فَمَا بَلَّغْتَ رِسَالَتَ, then you will not have discharged the prophetic obligation, your obligation as a messenger. In other words, they say that the only obligation of the messenger of God, may God's mercy be on him, was to discharge the responsibility of delivering everything that was revealed to him. And that is exactly what the Prophet did. The Quran says, وَاللَّهُ يَعْصِمُكَ مِنَ النَّاسِ, and God is going to protect you from men, from the evil of those who don't want this process to get complete. So, what they're saying is that the Quran was fully and completely delivered by the Prophet, and now that we have the Quran with us in its complete form, that's what we are supposed to take seriously and to follow it. Then they also go on to present another argument from Surah Al-An'am, which is the 6th chapter of the Quran, in verses 154 and 155. The Almighty is mentioning the fact that ثُمَّ آتَيْنَا مُوسَى الْكِتَابِ, then we revealed upon Moses, the book, that is Taurat, تَمَامًا عَلَى الَّذِي أَحْسَنَ, which completed whatever good was to be delivered. وَتَفْصِيلًا لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ, and it had details of everything. وَهُدًى وَرَحْمَةً, and it was a guidance and a blessing. لَعَلَّهُمْ بِلِقَاءِ رَبِّهِمْ يُؤْمِنُونَ, so that those who received this message should be able to believe in a meeting with the Almighty, believe in the next life, in other words. The next verse goes on to say, وَهَذَا كِتَابٌ أَنزَلْنَاهُ, and likewise is this book that we have revealed to you, Mubarakun, it's full of blessings. فَاتَّبِعُوهُ, so follow it. وَاتَّقُوا, and fear the Almighty. لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ, so that mercy be showered upon you. Now what these people, the Quranists, say is that, just look at what the Quran is saying. Like Torah, the Quran too is a book from God. And like the earlier book, this book also has tafseelan likulli shay, details of everything. So, if the Quran already mentions details of everything that we need, why should we need any other source? That's what the Quranist point of view is. So they are absolutely confident that there is no other source of knowledge which is important in religion except for the Quran. Now, how do those people who disagree with this point of view respond to this understanding? Obviously, you cannot talk to the Quranists from outside the Quran. Like, you cannot talk to the people of the book from outside the Bible. They don't believe anything else. They don't believe in the Quran as yet. Likewise, the Quranists do not accept any source of religious knowledge outside the Quran as valid. Therefore, those Muslim scholars who have attempted to counter the arguments of Quranists have come up with some arguments from within the Quran to show that the point of view of the Quranists is, after all, not very convincing. One of the passages that those who are trying to show that the Quranist point of view is not acceptable, they mention verse number 3 of Surah At-Tehreem, which is Surah 66, to put across their point of view. This verse verse 3 of Surah number 66, is actually talking about an incident. It says, وَإِذْ أَسَرَّ النَّبِيُّ إِلَىٰ بَعْضِ أَزْوَاجِهِ حَدِيثًا. And let them know of the incident when the Prophet shared with one of his wives a secret. فَلَمَّا نَبَّأَتْ بِهِ. And when she, that is his wife, let someone else know about the secret, أَظْهَرَهُ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ. God informed the messenger about it. That is, he let him know that the secret that you had shared is no more a secret. عَرَّفَ بَعْضَهُ وَعَارَضَ عَنْ بَعْضٍ. He, God, let him know some part of what happened and ignored some other part. فَلَمَّا نَبَّأَهَا بِهِ. Then, when he let her know about it, that is, when the Prophet let his wife with whom he shared the secret, when he let her know about it, about the fact that she's already let somebody else know about it, قَالَتْ مَنْ أَنْبَأَكَ هَذَا. His wife asked him, who told you about it? Obviously, she must have thought that the lady that she shared the secret with must have informed the Prophet, and she was upset about it. But the Prophet responded, the Quran says, قَالَ نَبَّأَنِيَ الْعَلِيمُ الْخَبِيرُ. He said, I was informed by the one who is all-knowing, all-informed. That is, I have been informed about it by God. Now those who are confronting the Quranists say that you read the entire text of the Quran and you will find nowhere a mention that the Almighty is informing the Prophet that his wife has let somebody else know about the secret that he shared with her. Which really means that this shows that the Almighty did communicate with the Prophet even outside the Quran. So that the hypothesis, the understanding that the Almighty only communicated with the Prophet through the Quran, and there was no other information that the Prophet received from the Almighty outside the Quran, this understanding is not correct. They also mention verse 9 of Surah Jummah. Surah Jummah is Surah number 62. We've already seen Surah Jummah in one of our earlier clips, wherein I was explaining Surah Unity. This verse says, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu, believers, iza nudiya lis-salati min yawmil Jummah. When you are called towards prayers, min yawmil Jummah, on Friday, fas'aw ila zikrillah, then you hasten towards God's remembrance, wazarul bay, and leave all your trading and worldly activities. Zalikum khairul lakum in kuntum ta'lamun. This is certainly going to be better for you if only you knew it. Faiza qudiyatis salat. Then when the prayer finishes, fantashiru fil ard, spread across the place, wabtaghu min fadlillah, and search for the bounties of God. Wazkurullaha kathiran la'allakum tuflihun, and remember God in abundance so that you may prosper. Now, those people who disagree with the Quranists ask the Quranists to explain what exactly does it mean that when you are called towards prayers on Friday, what exactly happens on Friday? There's no mention in the Quran except the mention in this particular verse. So, it really means that there was a Friday prayer that was going on in Medina, initiated by the Prophet, may God's mercy be on him. Muslims were asked to assemble in the masjid and say the Friday prayer in congregation. And it was considered to be an important religious obligation. And it seems from the mention of these verses that there were some people who were not taking it seriously. And the Almighty asked believers to rush towards the remembrance of God and to attend the Friday prayer. That's what is going to be better for them if only they knew it. What they're saying is that the Friday prayer, the Jummah prayer, was initiated by the Prophet. It was said regularly in Medina, and there is no mention of it in the Quran that that's how it ought to have been done. But the Quran is asking believers to take this Jummah prayer, which has been initiated and officially, formally introduced by the Prophet, to take it seriously, to do it. In other words, the Quran is telling us that there was indeed a religion given by the Prophet to Muslims that happened to be outside the mention of the Quran, outside the text of the Quran. Likewise, they also refer to verse 103 of Surah Nisa, which is the 4th surah, and they say something similar. What they say is that in this particular verse, the Almighty is again requiring believers to say their prayers and is telling them that these prayers are to be said at their appointed times. The Almighty says, فَإِذَا قَضَيْتُمُ الصَّلَاةِ, then when you finish your prayers, فَاذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ قِيَامًا وَقُعُودًا وَعَلَى جُنُوبِكُمْ, then remember God while standing, sitting, and even lying on your beds. فَإِذَا اطْمَأْنَنْتُمْ, and then when you are able to attain peace, an atmosphere of security, فَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةِ, then offer proper prayers. إِنَّ الصَّلَاةَ كَانَتْ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ كِتَابًا مَوْقُوتًا, indeed, the formal prayer is binding upon Muslims to be said at the appointed times. Now, those who do not agree with the Quranist view, they ask, what exactly is this prayer that the Quran is talking about? What are its appointed times that it is mentioning are important and binding for believers to follow? There's no mention in the Quran. At best, you might say that there are some vague, indirect references which do not give us a very clear picture of what exactly are those timings. And we don't know what kind of rituals are we expected to follow while performing formal prayer. So all in all, what they say is that the Quran is giving us a clear indication that there was definitely some part of religion that was introduced by the Prophet which was not mentioned directly, clearly, in detail in the Quran. There is another interesting verse that they refer to bring home their point, their understanding. It's a verse in Surah An-Noor, Surah 24, verse 58. In this verse, the Almighty is asking believers to make sure that they allow private space to couples in certain parts of the day, when anybody who enters their rooms ought to seek their permission first. Now, while talking about those different parts of the day when this privacy has to be maintained, the Almighty mentions min qabli salatil fajr wa hina tad'una thiyabakum min az-zahira wa min ba'di salatil isha. These are three different times of the day, two of which have been expressed in a way that the Almighty is saying, in case of one of them, min qabli salatil fajr, before the fajr prayer. And another time of privacy for the couples that is mentioned is min badi salatil isha, after the isha prayer. Now those who do not agree with the Quranist point of view ask, what exactly is this fajr prayer? And what exactly is this isha prayer? The only mention of these two prayers that we find in the Quran is in this verse and nowhere else. And the mention has been made in such a manner that the Almighty expects that people already know what Fajr prayer is and what Isha prayer is, because they have already been introduced by the Prophet. They were already saying those prayers. So in other words, the Quran took the timings of Fajr and Isha prayer as well known to Muslims and asked them to make sure that during these timings they would allow people, couples, complete privacy. In other words, the Quran is acknowledging that there was a part of religion that Muslims were following and practicing outside the Quran, and the Quran endorsed that religion, confirmed it by mentioning some part of it in a way as if it was a part of God's religion and it had to be accepted, practiced by Muslims. We will now talk about the third point of view in our next meeting. I hope you are enjoying these sessions, and I hope that God's religion is getting more and more clear to you. May the Almighty enable us to understand His religion properly, and may He enable us to follow it as best as is possible.